We're really thrilled to have Tony Williams come and speak to us today. He's a computational chemist at the National Center of Computational Toxicology, and there he works on the center's database, providing information to the community through the chemistry dashboard. He's had over 20 years, 2 decades of experience in chem informatics and chemical information management. He's employed these skills at Kodak as the Chief Science Officer for ACD Labs and as VP of Strategic Development for the Royal Society of Chemistry. He's worked extensively on complex data management issues with a focus on internet-based solutions to provide free access to the scientific community for these kinds of chemistry websites and services. In particular, ChemSpider, which he has worked on and developed, has over 50,000 users per day. So these are very popular sites. He's also authored more than 180 papers, books, and book chapters. And he's passionate about what he's going to talk to us today about. Teaching scientists such as ourselves how to benefit from the developing array of social media networking tools, and he's known as the Chem Connector on these networks, and his Chem Connector blog is a top 50 chemistry website award winner. He's also the recipient of the Jim Gray Award for eScience in 2012, as well as the American Chemical Society North Carolina Distinguished Speaker of the Year just last year. So please join me in welcoming Tony Williams, and we look forward to your talk.
Hello, hello. Thanks for joining me for lunch, I guess. So I'm fortunate enough to work at EPA, where they allow me to pursue what I think of as a hobby project. This is something I've been doing for fun. Having worked at the RSC for 5.5 years, I got engaged with a lot of students because I was traveling around the universities. And I saw an opportunity for them to do things that I couldn't do. So I don't know how long you've been working with equipment, but I used to start my spectrometer with paper tape and cards and record things on cassette tapes and stuff like that. So all of the data that I generated in those days is gone. It's evaporated. In fact, most of the data we generate today, in my opinion, that could go online is gone, is not accessible. We don't share it the way we should. In fact, even with the papers that we publish, I don't think we're sharing data in the way that can be reused, consumed, reinterpreted, etc. So I started to spread that message because I built this little website as a hobby called ChemSpider, and I wanted people to share as much data as they could with me. Every time I got into these discussions, people said, well, how is that good for me? How does that benefit my career? I'm going to share this data, but what's in it for me? And that's actually how we should be thinking in many ways. Consider ourselves as a part of the equation, but consider the overall ensemble of science and what's in it for them as well as us. I think I have that captured in here. So if you go onto SlideShare, how many of you in here use SlideShare? Okay. Is that for sharing? Put your hands up if you share stuff via SlideShare. It's called sharing for a reason. So most of us are consumers, not sharers, right? So we take things from these sites. If there's anything that comes up on my slide deck here that you want to write down, you can do that if you choose, but my slide deck will be public by the end of the day. In fact, 330 presentations that I've given are sitting here. They're all CC BY. You can take them, you can reuse them. Also sitting on here, I have original manuscripts, preprints, manuscripts that didn't get accepted, but I still think are good science. I try to give everything away that I'm allowed to, and now I work at EPA, we release things in certain ways. It's a little more controlled. But this slide deck will be here, slide share. This is what I think will come up as I talk. So this is a valid question. By the time you're probably already judging me. This is the way we work as humans. When we start interviewing people for jobs, we're already judging them really quickly. Microsoft have made an analysis of a 2-hour job interview that they distill down to a few minutes, and they see whether or not the decision about that person changes with time. And mostly we're making calls on things very, very quickly. So the way we work as humans is you're already calling me on whether or not this is going to be narcissistic or self-marketing. And I'm going to tell you as we go, yes, both. It absolutely is. You should be thinking about yourself, but there are so many benefits in sharing what you do to the world. This is also a formal report. There's a link at the bottom, so it's going to give you a lot more information about that choice, self-marketing and narcissism. I will also tell you that some of the things I'm going to say sound ageist. I'm 52. I'm entitled to be ageist. I'm crossing that line where the youth are starting to look at me going, why are you teaching us to use these tools? Surely you're too old. Okay, yes. But I still think I have something useful to say. And I do believe that many of the tools I'm going to show you are incredibly powerful to use earlier in your career. We were just having a discussion right here about, if you're established, if you've already got grants, if you've got 100 papers, do you need these tools? I would say there are definitely benefits to these tools. Do you need them earlier in your career? I think you need them more earlier in your career because you're starting in a much more saturated environment. There's more people going for smaller grant funds. You need to rise above the noise somehow. And if you can figure out a way to do that, it doesn't make you a better scientist. And I will show you examples where it looks like I'm a great scientist. And I would say don't misinterpret the numbers. It means I know how to use these tools to establish a profile and to rise above the noise. This is a slide that I used recently at a presentation at NC State. And if you look, I'm not going to read it to you, I'll let you read it. Look at where the comment came from. It actually came from NC State. And it is not the job of researchers to figure out how to market themselves or your work. Is that a true statement? Because when we go to present, that is what we're doing. When we write up our work, that is what we're doing. But that's only a part of the puzzle. Because once you've actually got your publication out there, once you've got your presentation out there, once you've got your story out there, to hang it somewhere and wait for somebody to pay attention does not work in an environment where we're just getting inundated and saturated with signal. It's probably not the best analogy, but at least it's comedic. I had a friend from Texas who came up to do a postdoc with me in Canada, and he sat in his room for 4 months because of the snow. He'd never really seen it before. And at the end of 4 months, he says, I'm not dating yet. I says, yes, they generally don't come knocking. You can be brilliant, but they're not going to come knocking. You actually have to do something to get out there. So I think you have to do this. My hopes for today, manyfold, and if I can just resonate with a 10 to 20% hit on a couple of these, that would be great for me. So I'd like you to participate, but if you choose not to, that's absolutely okay. It has no impact on me. Unless you're doing science that I'm interested in, at which point you're robbing me of the possibility to get your data, reinterpret it, and form a collaboration. So I'm selfish. I want to provide you an overview of some of the tools, and I've looked at dozens of tools. So I've literally done a lot of the heavy lifting for you, so you don't have to waste time looking at things that are blipping up all the time. There are so many new tools that are popping up every few months that we could go invest in. And I'd say I've done a lot of that pre-work for you, and I'm going to guide you towards some of the ones that I think have the most impact. Some stories, statistics, and strategies, and sharing for the sake of the community and science as well as for yourself. You might not see that as a benefit initially. It takes time to establish your profile. It doesn't come overnight. The fact that I'll show you some stats on my own profile. It didn't come overnight. It's taken 5-6 years of effort to get there, incrementally. But the benefits that have come out for the community are very obvious. Good collaborations, people taking data from me because I told them it existed, people writing up publications, sitting on data I generated in a lab for their benefit as well as for mine. The outcomes. How many people in the room have an orchid? Oh, I was hoping for more. Oh. My hope is by the end of this, you see the benefits of an orchid. How many people in the room have a social security number? Okay, at least I've got a response. That's good. The orchid is the social security number for you in science. And you will notice as you start to publish from this point forward, how many publishers are saying, we need your orchid. Publish 3 papers in a month. In every case, the publishers have come back and asked for my orchid. A year ago, that wasn't happening. So things have actually changed. RSC are now asking for ORCIDs, ACS are asking for ORCIDs. I mean, literally, this has changed massively in 1 year. I think you should invest about 2 hours per month on your profile. That can happen pretty much anywhere. While you're standing in a Starbucks line and they're getting longer and longer, you can be doing something on your profile. Think of the time that you have in a month and how 2 hours could be dribbled in every 5 or 10 minutes during that month to actually show what you've been doing, to share publications, to share presentations. And I will tell you some of the fastest ways to do that. That's eventually, if you have not done anything in this area yet, you're going to have an activation barrier to cross. And you're going to have to invest some early work. And again, that's a choice. And then you will have a bigger impact online, I believe. If there's anybody who thinks that they don't contribute to aspect of that, then I'm not sure that I'm resonating with you yet, because we're all doing this as scientists. We produce data sets, we produce publications, we produce presentations, posters, reports that can circulate externally as well as internally. These are all things that we do. My thesis is written in something called KaiWriter. I don't know if you even remember it, but it's dead. It's on 5¼ inch discs. I can't even read it anymore. Performances in film and audio. How many of you have got YouTube videos? Okay. If you go to a place and give a talk like this and it's posted online, you should do the work to make sure that you're seen. Over and over and over, we're actually starting to discover that the movies and photographs and things are made of us, and you can find them online accidentally. I don't know if you've ever done that, but I've stumbled across things I didn't even know I was being recorded. But I would like people to hear my message. So how do you spread that out? And then you have all types of research that we do, of course. I'll let you read it. So any piece of work that we publish at the end as a manuscript is generally going to be hundreds to thousands of hours of work. If you can luckily do it in a few tens, that's great research, by the way, in theory. But when the publisher gets that manuscript, people like to think that it's the publisher's job to help you spread the message about that. Well, I worked for a publisher for 5.5 years. I can tell you our job is to get more manuscripts. I've been at the EPA for 2 years. To get more manuscripts, to help put up PDF files online that you will pay $35 for, to create impact factors as best we can to build profile. It is not to spend much time at all on spreading the message about your manuscript. You'll be lucky if one tweet goes out about it. Maybe if it's really impactful research, somebody will talk to you about it. Maybe it'll end up in a magazine. Maybe it'll end up on a blog post. But think of the millions of articles that are coming through. Publishers don't have time to market your work. You have to do that job. And if you think about the work that goes into a manuscript, why wouldn't you put at least a couple of hours into making sure that people find it? Now, you could say, I always do that. I send an email to my contacts. Okay, that's your contacts. That's not the community, that's your contacts. So how do you get it out to the larger community? If you're on LinkedIn and you've done enough work to get 100 people to follow you, connect to you, to link to you, and you put it on there, you at least have informed 100 more people, and maybe some of them will look at it. What about if you invest the work to grow your community and it's now 1,000 people? 5% of 100, 5% of 1,000. You're trying to expand the community that gets visibility into your work. 12:30 last night, I got an email from a colleague from a local university who said, we're trying to figure out for our students, our PhD students and our postdocs, when they leave here, how can we rank order the the value of their publications? How good are their publications? And the classic measures are, where did you publish? Is it a highly ranked journal? And how many citations does it have? Well, imagine a postdoc that's just walking out and the publication just got published. No citations. So what can you say about that? Is it good work? Is it bad work? What about that scientist walks out 1 month after publishing it, it's got no citations, but there's been 5,000 downloads in the first week, and there are 3 conversations about that in the media, and by the way, it's also shown up on a news story, assuming it's good science, not bad science. Because you can get very high profile for really bad science, right? That's why we have a retraction watch. So these are things called altmetrics, and these are all important. They're above and beyond this thing of citations and where do you publish. And I sent the professor my response, and I said, you have to look into something called altmetrics. By the way, same story about a presentation. So how much work did I put into this? Well, the reality of it is it's probably a couple of hours work because I've given this so many times. I did change it, I did edit it, I tweaked it for the audience. But when you go to a conference, RTI is paying for you to get on a plane. You've lost productive hours because none of us can function very well on a plane anymore without feeling threatened, according to the media. So you're working as best you can, but now you get there. They paid for your hotels, they paid for your travel, they paid for your conference attendance, and at best you're going to be in a room and give a talk for 20 to 30 minutes to whoever many people is going to show up at that moment. Maybe 50, maybe 100. The cost to have you give that presentation for that one room is enormous, including all the work that was done to get the science to present. What would it be like if you could share that and pick up an additional audience of 1,000 people a month? So you've only spoken in that room once, but 1,000 people a month are now taking your slide decks. I have example slide decks now where I've had over 25,000 people view them. But I remember distinctly the room I gave the presentation in Philadelphia, and it was 15 people on the last day and the last afternoon of a conference where everybody's already going home to see friends and family. So think about reusing your work and keeping it alive outside. And that's the benefit of this. Okay. Orchids, I got the question on how many of you got LinkedIn profiles? Yay. So if I asked you why, what's the answer that pops up? Shout it out. Professional development. Supposed to. Yeah, I like that one. That's a good one, right? Got to have a profile. Any more? Peer pressure. It's supposed to. So I think of this as the one place that people are going in the headhunter space, in the human resource space. I've been involved with hiring people at RSC, at EPA. When I get a list of people that I'm going to interview, I go to the LinkedIn profile. I guarantee you that the headhunters and the HR people are going there. How many of you are paying for your LinkedIn profile? Not a one of you. Who do you think's paying? So the headhunters, because that's what they want to do. They want to get into more information about you. You know who owns LinkedIn? No. Close. Microsoft. You know how much they paid for it? Billions of dollars, because they have a possibility here to get into all of this information, this big data world that we're exploding into. And LinkedIn also happens to own the thing that I showed at the beginning called SlideShare. So every slide deck that you put in, you're one button click away from sharing it via LinkedIn. So every time I give a talk, I click one button. It's now out to a network of, I think there's 2,800 followers on LinkedIn. Everything is trying to connect. Everything is trying to network at this point. This is the one place that I think you should be the most professional. Look, I even dyed my hair for that one. I managed to do this at the camera, you know. To land at a LinkedIn page where you're standing on the top of a mountain, as much as it's your hobby and your passion, it's a great thing to do. I love mountains. I would not put that photograph on there. When I get invitations from people who are standing on the beach with their girlfriend wearing a bikini, that is not something that I think you should be doing. So think about it. This is the professional hub for networking. But it's more than that. It is a place to keep your electronic CV. So all the projects that you're involved with, that you're allowed to make public. So I don't know how you control what can be shared publicly here. So you have to make those decisions. That has to be managed. But I've worked in multiple environments, including Fortune 500 publishers, where I could literally share anything. EPA, where we share a lot of stuff and can keep a lot of stuff close to our chest. So there are certain things you can share. So this is an example of experience. This is one of my roles. It's the network of who's connected to you on that role that says a lot about you. I really don't want to link into my plumber. I mean, he's great. He shows up when I have blockages in the toilets and stuff. But I don't really need him on LinkedIn, right? So you choose the people who are linked to that. So make those correct requests. Projects. So these are really big projects I was involved with. The top one was a 16 million euro project, 3 years, 50 organizations. Big deal. We built all the chemistry support. When you look at the team members, these are high-profile scientists in Europe and in North America that came together to do this. But the project itself is defined. By the way, everything I'm showing you here is one button click away for me to download a PDF file of the CV and forward it to anybody. So when I had a request recently, is can you send me your CV? I said, do you want a short one or the full one? It needs to be up to date. Whew, click. Sent a PDF directly generated on LinkedIn. So you're literally keeping your CV alive. And that's only because that's where I add projects and publications and stuff. Articles. I think it is abysmal that LinkedIn does not yet use something called DOI that we all know and love, because it is the way to resolve. They have no idea what it is. I do not want to retype an abstract or a title of a paper or the list of authors. But LinkedIn is not that intelligent about what we do yet. I think that will come with time. But this is where I list publications. In fact, I'm already out of date. I need to add more. It does take time to do some of this stuff. And as I go, you will almost certainly feel overwhelmed. It is the most common question I get at the end. This is too much. How do I choose? And I will try to suggest at the end how to do this. Here's an example of things getting networked. So my postings where I share things online are going out to the network to which I'm connected. So I have opened up my LinkedIn profile. If we have time at the end, I will show you what is showing up in front of me every day that I feel useful to me from my network. It's very powerful. But as I share a slide share presentation, information about a new publication, information about a new project, it goes out in front of my connections. The results of this have been, objectively, phone calls from people saying, I definitely want to get hold of that data. We're working on a project like that right now. I noticed that your supplementary info file was incomplete and you mentioned XYZ. I'm dangling this information in front of people. It's literally throwing stuff at the wall, blindly in some ways, strategically in some, blindly in others, hoping that some of it is going to stick to the community to which I'm engaged, because I want them to engage with me. It's not that we're not all busy already, but there is so much benefit to working with the container outside of us. Right? Ask for recommendations. Don't be shy. People won't always give them. In fact, probably I'm at 70% of all LinkedIn requests. When people come to me and make a LinkedIn request, I want to have at least met them, talked to them, shook hands with them. We have an example in the room. A gentleman came up and introduced himself after a recent symposium. I don't want blind requests. However, if I have a request from somebody where it says there's 100 people in my circle that's connected to them, but I don't know who they are, I will go browse through their profile. And, oh yeah, this looks interesting. And I won't just accept it. I will open up and I will message them back and say, accepting your request, I'm interested to follow up. I see you did this piece of work. It's actually trying to form a more meaningful relationship than the ones my children seem to pull off on Snapchat. I don't understand what most of these emojis are. They just confuse me. But when I see a stream of them, I go, that's meaningful. So ask your connections to come back to you. Endorsements. What you will notice here, so my profile is I'm an NMR scientist by training. That's my PhD. I was in analytical chemistry for many years, worked at Kodak, and then we just kept wasting time, money, effort in analytical data. We kept on reproducing the same data all the time in different labs. So I got into informatics for that reason. I didn't solve the problem of Kodak's CEO saying digital photography would have no impact. That one was not my call. But I was there when he said it. So I'm a chemist and an analytical chemist. Those are my endorsements. And then third is I'm in drug discovery. The only drug I've discovered is an aspirin on my kitchen floor. That's it. But I've never worked in pharmaceutical companies, but I have written software and I have written articles in modern drug discovery. But I'm endorsed for drug discovery, which is interesting. I have control of over all of these endorsements. People endorse me for things. If you feel that they do not fit what you want your profile to be, you can control them directly on the page. So please do that. Be careful which ones you accept. Make sure that you're managing your profile. And that's going to be a constant message. You are responsible for your profile. People are gathering data on you every day, whether you know it or not. If you have an orchid, I can already point you to sites about you with your orchid, with your information from orchid, totally rebranded that you're unaware of, because orchid data is open and available for people to consume. And I'm shocked when I do a search on my ORCID how my data keeps proliferating. Well, it's on ORCID for a reason. It's actually, I want it to be public, but really, it's just proliferating everywhere. You need to control your profile because it can get pretty ugly pretty fast. Here's an example of an instant summary as a PDF. So put the work in to the LinkedIn platform and use the fact that you can generate a PDF at any point to share it with people. And you can also prune it, of course. This is the story of the SlideShare being acquired by LinkedIn because they realize that what we do as professionals is we actually do this. We stand up in front of audiences, we give presentations, and ultimately we would want our network to be aware of what we do. And I would say take advantage of the fact that LinkedIn has done it, but take advantage of the fact that SlideShare, I don't think any of you put your hands up knowing that LinkedIn had acquired SlideShare. SlideShare has an enormous user base. So when I go to the platform, it actually starts to inform me of presentations that are linked to my area of expertise. So it starts dangling new presentations in front of me that I might be interested in. Those of you who use Google Scholar Citations, which I'll hit on later, should almost certainly be logging into Google Scholar Citations, and up on the top right-hand side, there's a red bell telling you 10 new articles that may be of interest to you. They are so good with what they've done at linking together that these articles are all relevant to me at this point. It's really hard for me to find. It's hard for me to be notified of something I don't want to read. Now you have a different problem. Overwhelm, time. I don't want to read all those papers. I don't have the time, blah, blah, blah. Same thing going on here. So share your work and it will start to connect into the domain, which means that you need to make sure that the tags on the data are correct. Don't depend just on the title. One on the right-hand side, how one monkey on a keyboard made a difference. I don't really want to be indexed to Jane Goodall. That would not make sense, right? So you have to make sure that the tags on the article are appropriate to get you into the right result set when people search. When these get uploaded, which is probably a 30, 40 second operation, take your PowerPoint, click upload, copy paste the abstract, which has already been cleared by your organization, hopefully. Add a couple of tags, hit publish. Then it shows up here, it gets transformed into the LinkedIn format that they need to show, and then I click one button and it's added on my profile by default. Very powerful. Commonly, after loading a slide deck, at this point, I get about 100 downloads overnight. I've also run experiments. I gave a talk similar to this at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, where I ran a live experiment 1 hour before the presentation. I said, I'm at HHMI, Howard Hughes Medical Institute. I'm going to give this talk in an hour. I'm putting it on SlideShare. Please help me prove the network effect. And my hope was that by the time I got to the end of the 1 hour, so 2 hours from registering it to showing the results, my hope was to show that I could get 100 views in 2 hours. My recollection is 354 views in 2 hours. Now, does that mean that 354 people read it? Probably not. Does it mean that 354 people got on my side and said, we're going to prove the network effect? Yes. What I have is a following and engagement. But I do know how many people downloaded it. I do know the people, but they gave me love, which is always good, right? You get love. You don't get thumbs up, you get love. So it's a little more advanced. Plus you can download the presentations. Right, so on the right-hand side, you click the button and download it. So again, you will take away what you need from these sites. Highly accessed. So these captures are a few months out of date, but about 1,000 views in a week. And of course, I have a following, so you won't manage to achieve that without some work. And almost 85,000 in a year, which is a heck of a result set when you think that you've been writing these presentations, getting on a plane. We all work really hard. We get to the place, we give a 20-minute talk, and we've informed 20 people or 100 or whatever it is. It's certainly not this. So the biggest return is the fact that this keeps on going. It keeps on returning. And you need to then link forward from these presentations to the later work to keep people informed that here's an update. It's an example of not using it just for PowerPoints, but actually for documents, PDF files, etc. So I take advantage of the fact that the open access world allows me to take some of these open access articles and put them right on SlideShare. And then I link those directly into my other accounts for networking. The one and the third one along is a PLOS article. We played a particular game to see whether or not we could get that to be a high profile. And we managed to get to the top 1% of PLOS One articles in just a few weeks by using social networking. Is it gaming or is it savvy? Well, you could call it gaming. We used blogs and we used Twitter and we used distribution channels like this to get this to a high profile. The result was that this turned out to be reported in multiple magazines. It ended up having people buy new equipment because the article had proven that there is a distinction between the bioassays you measure with pipette tips versus acoustic dispensing. And it turns out the pharmaceutical industry had known about this for a long time, but had never really made it public because it was an advantage for them. So you can play games to get elevation, but true science will always pay back in reality. This is ResearchGate. How many of you in ResearchGate? How many of you hate how many emails you get from ResearchGate? How many of you have used the settings in ResearchGate to stop yourself getting emails? Only one person who knows how to do that. Did it go down? Yeah. So if you're objecting to the number of emails, please don't use that as the reason to block ResearchGate usage. ResearchGate's very useful, very powerful. Bill Gates put money into it. I knew the guy right from the beginning. Ejad was building this at the same time I was building ChemSpider. He had no funding. We were having a great conversation. Then all of a sudden he got a load of money. ResearchGate has gone on to be great, and it annoys people with emails. Go in the settings, switch them all off, but take advantage of the network. It cites me as having 347 publications. That number does not match up with the introduction. Why? Because it treats a publication as a PowerPoint slide deck too. So I have lots of things on here that are not formal peer-reviewed publications. 34,000 views on those publications, I believe. 15,500 downloads. It's a lot of downloads that are not coming from SlideShare, that are not coming from the publishers. That's a lot of people taking stuff. 2,400 citations. Does that blend and match directly what I would get on Google Scholar Citations and Thomson? No. What is the true number? We don't know. It's because they all do it differently. It's about the same, give or take 5%, I think. And then I have 518.42 impact points, which is really important. I'm not sure what it means. That 0.42 especially, who knows? And they also changed their algorithms. So at one point I was a 63, and overnight I was a 57. It kept me awake all night, just wondering, what did I do? And then they put up a blog post. We redid our algorithm. Okay. Notice, right-hand side, United States EPA, Corvallis, North Carolina. So Kevin Crofton, who I work with, one of my bosses, he has things show up on ResearchGate that he doesn't even control, which is worrying, right? He even has things show up on LinkedIn that he doesn't control. So I showed him his LinkedIn profile and said, where did that image come from, Kevin? I don't know. Manage your profile. You have to. Publication stats, citations, profile views. These are different views. It's always good to get something like the one at the bottom. This is an email that shows up. 155 new downloads. You were the most downloaded researcher from your department last week. Yes, that would be great if it was the department at NCCT, because I work with amazing scientists. But this was when I was working out of a basement and there was only 2 of us. So, but it is nice to get these emails. I got one last night saying this article has been cited 50 times, and I don't monitor my citations. So I was like, oh, really? What I want to know is who's citing me, so I can go check the paper to see whether or not that's a benefit. So this is an information channel for me to find out who likes my work. Well, it was cited. Doesn't mean it was liked. That's a different world. Academia.edu. Anybody know this one? Okay, so this to me is the primary challenger to ResearchGate in many ways. I used it for a period because I met the guy at a scientific conference here in the Triangle. Science Online. And I tried it. I like it. but it's mostly directed to liberal arts rather than science. But I used it for a period, and look at the top right-hand side, top 0.5% of 30-day views does not make me a good scientist. And please don't rank any of these statistics as that I'm doing good science. I hope I am. I believe I am. But they are not valued there. They are impact factors for the online world that are suggestive of the fact that I'm engaged. That's it. Okay. However, I can tell you that in the UK right now, the academic institutions are using sites like this to review how visible your work is. Don't underestimate the power of these, whatever they represent. They are actually being used now by funding agencies. They are looking into these numbers. How many of you review papers? I'm assuming a lot. How many of you get credit for, other than feeling good and droopy eyes in the morning? Does anybody in the room use Publons? Well done, well done. Do you like it? Do you see the value of it? Okay, so Publons is a platform that's absolutely 100% free for you to use. Everything I'm pointing to is free to you to use. What you do here is you take the review that you've done on a particular article, you register, bottom left-hand corner, let me see here. Oops, excuse me. So in the left-hand corner under my photograph where I dyed my hair, there is an ORCID number. You can see the ID. So there's an ORCID ID associated with it. There is a Publons ID associated with it. There's a button on the bottom of that says Add to LinkedIn, which means that on my LinkedIn profile, I have a Publons badge that says I'm a Publons user. Publons means that I have been putting my reviews of articles online. You're making your reviews public? Well, I'm making public the fact that I reviewed for this journal. You can see how many reviews I did in a year. You can see what publishers I'm reviewing for. And if the journals and the publishers and the journals themselves allow me to make the review public, which is a shifting facet of the publishing industry, one button click and my review that I did on that article when it's public is visible. It's 100% open. I'm one of those people who believes that we are getting to a point where all reviews will be made public for all articles, and they should be. I believe that reviews should not be anonymized. I believe that everybody should be able to know who it is that reviewed their articles. We're going to have a lot of change to have that happen, and I understand it's a threatening world, but I believe it's coming, and it's the right way. But here at least you can see that I've been engaged in reviews. Imagine if you're early in your career, I'm sure you've probably reviewed 200 papers, 500 papers, thousands, right? Many of us have at this, later in our career, but if you're junior in your career, and I have a postdoc in my lab right now who has already been reviewing, I want when he moves on to his next job to be able to point to his Publons profile and says, wow, you reviewed 8 papers in 1 year for these top level journals. That's an incredible public stroke for your skill as a scientist to be invited by these publishers to do that. Free, I recommend you go use it. How many of you use Kudos? That's the right pronunciation. You do, excellent. Oh, you hate it? That's a really bad recommendation. Okay, so this is one of the challenges I think with Kudos is when I first saw it inside RSC, I was invited to look at it. I went, I don't need another place to claim an article. I really don't. What I saw was this point 2. I can claim an article that I've written and then I can enrich it. Then I can share the enrichment and I can measure the impact. So what does enrichment mean? So in this case, I claimed the article. All authors can claim the same article and then enrich it. The last part at the bottom, all 3 can be filled in by each author because we may all have different views of the value of an article. That's what we are, we're human. So if I came to 5 different authors of a paper and I said, please write up why you think this is important, you're going to get 5 different descriptions. So I think that's valuable. And then you put that online. And this is what I'm doing is I'm going through the different steps of claiming, enriching, etc. I'll show you the enrichment part. It certainly increased awareness of the article because Kudos is plugged into the network and shares it across the standard distribution channels, LinkedIn, Twitter. I don't think they use Facebook, Google+, things like this. I got an additional number of views on my article via Kudos. So people who were using the platform saw work that might be of interest to them. So all of a sudden the views went up. Was that good that they read it? I don't know, but it's more eyes than I would have had originally. And think again, amplification. 431 downloads. This is on one article. That's a lot of downloads. If you look across your articles, unless you're published at some of the higher levels, it can take you months to get downloads at that level. I published an article with my postdoc recently. Got 700 downloads in 2 months. And I've compared it across our center. And I know that our article is actually rather, it's not unimportant, but it's a lower level than many of the articles coming out of the center. Because we put work into amplification, the downloads were actually higher. This helps make that happen. This is where I see the value. And this is the part that kudos themselves, I don't think, have telling the value proposition of. When you have an article, how many of you have noticed an error in your own article where you've said, I'm not writing up an erratum on that, that's too much work? Are all of you that honest that you've always written up an error, addressed an error? Good on you. I know many people who said, no, it's a minor error. Well, I believe that we should clean all these up. The web platforms already, like PLOS, allow you to come onto your own publication and make a change. So that's powerful. Somebody called me on an error in a PLOS publication in 24 hours. I logged in and I made the comment immediately and I changed it. Here, you may actually choose to write up a little Word doc that says, we reanalyzed the data. It's not really an erratum in this case. We reanalyzed the data. We're not going to release this as a fresh publication, but we want people who are reading this publication to see this reanalysis. Where would you put that? So here, you can put that on an open Google Doc and link to it from the publication to a reanalysis. You could also have your later publications, because publications cite backwards. We have no way of taking a publication and citing forwards, right? You could also have electronic lab notebook pages, blog posts, media articles, movies, presentations on SlideShare, all the stuff that you say about the science that you captured once in this article, you almost certainly are continuing to talk about and work on. You now have an opportunity to link this up. The way that happens, did anybody ever see this little image? I drink water. I especially drink water at 12 o'clock in a bar in Belgium. And I was with a professor from Oxford, and he asked the question of, is there a molecule that looks like the Olympic rings? And I said, no. But why don't we go make it? So it was just before the London Olympics. I ran back to my hotel room. I got on ChemSpider. I drew a molecule that looked like the Olympic rings. I called it Olympocene because I'm very creative. And then we went off and made it. We made it with, there was a student in University of Warwick who synthesized it. 7 different steps, every step made public. That's his hand holding up a vial. Then we shipped a sample of that material to IBM. They absorbed the chemical onto the surface. And what you're seeing, image 2 and 4, and at the bottom on the left-hand side, are single atom microscopy. So they took the chemical, absorbed it, and took single atom, single molecule microscopy images. A fun story. It turned out that this was enormous. This has actually been published on. People have redone the synthesis using all of the chemical syntheses that we made public. The syntheses were all public for 2 years before we wrote up the publication. People were already publishing on Olympocene before we'd done our publication. That's true open science, by the way. You share your data before you've even written it up. Not all of us are going to want to do that. This is the paper that finally came out on this. And what I did was I claimed it, which is literally take the DOI, do the search, claim. It's all the stuff that came after that. That's interesting. It got reported in the Daily Mail. It got reported in the Huffington Post. It got reported, it was on a TV program, which I didn't have a recording of. All these papers that came out of it. So what I've done is cited forwards, I call it forward citation, from the work that was done to the resulting science that is fun. So think about whether or not there's an opportunity for you to connect your work together that way. Altmetrics. So impact is not just where you publish and how many citations you get. It's how many students do you have that you train that go on to do amazing things in the world. It's all of the presentations that you give that may never get cited. It's all the work that you do to do peer review. That is impact. You're having an amazing impact to do that. All the alt metrics, links, downloads, conversations, etc. This is a real world. There was a time at which it was being challenged where people said this is of no value whatsoever. Believe me, it's arrived. Your articles already have altmetrics on, whether you know it or not. There are multiple platforms that are being used for this today. Altmetric is one of them. How many of you recognize the altmetric donut? Good. So you're already seeing. This is Impact Story, and it has a number at the top. That number is my social security number for science. That's my ORCID ID. I like it. I think it's valuable. I would not necessarily say that this is the one for you to go jump on. A couple of limitations. First of all, it only manages the latest 100 articles, publications that you have out. But it's fun. I have these badges, Wikitastic, Greatest Hit. I also have one called Bob Fan, where somebody called Robert gave me a thumbs up on my article. I mean, just fun stuff. This actually started with one of the key people was from Jason Priam from University of North Carolina, so one of the local guys. But you can see on a particular, the activity is coming through, as you can see Twitter, Mendeley reads, LinkedIn, Facebook, Wikipedia. So all my articles are being linked into all of these public platforms, and I have a way to see it. And here's an example. You can actually look down, click through to the full text. It's another path through for people to find my articles. This is an example of, on this one article, all of the things that were said online about this. I showed this recently to my scientists inside the EPA, and one of them came to me afterwards and says, I didn't know that 80 different news media had talked about my article till he looked at this type of information. He had no idea, because nobody calls you up to ask your permission. These are the donuts. This is the one that you're mostly seeing on the right-hand side. Those numbers tell you about tweets, news articles, etc., and you can drill down. This is the postdoc's paper, and you can see bottom left-hand side, referenced in 2 Wikipedia pages. It's already on a video that was made in Durham by ResearchGate. Research Square, thank you very much. All of this information is being picked up automatically. Do you know how to get this on your articles? How many people in the room know how to do it? Yeah. All you do is go to the altmetric page and get the bookmarklet. This is free. Go to the page, drag the bookmarklet to the top of the browser. When you come to your article, just click on altmetric it, and the donut will show up with this information. Yep. Yep. I'm being told to wind it up here. So, very quickly, Google Scholar citations. Oh, you wanted me to repeat the question. Sorry, misinterpreting. So that you're using it on your internal systems and showing altmetric on every article. We're doing the same inside NCCT right now. We're building our own impact platform where we will have altmetrics shown. Google Scholar citations. Hopefully many of you are using this. I hope you're monitoring it. I hope you're controlling it. You get a lot of noise. These are supposed to be co-authors. I don't know any of them. And the reason being is literally in 1 week, they added 60 new articles to my profile, none of which are mine. 60. And I don't know why. It used to be so good. I'm Welsh. Originally, I thought that was sheep health in New South Wales. It's all about where you grow up. So delete them. If they're not supposed to be on your profile, please delete them. Add articles that are missed. It doesn't always pick up my articles, so add them. You control your profile. This is what Google Scholar is not even caring about. I've talked to the people who run Google Scholar. They don't care about ORCIDs yet. The noise is there's not enough signal. So I think this will change because on 2 days before Pi Day, it crossed 3.14 million ORCIDs. So If you have an ORCID and you put ORCIDs on your presentations, your publications, you'll be able to search it and you'll be able to find everything about you online through that ORCID. It's a very powerful way of searching. So what next? So first of all, I teach a 2-hour course. It's turning out to be every 6 months over in the Frontier building, where you bring your computers and we will go through real examples. So I'll make sure that Becky hears about that, and next time feel free to come along and we'll go into some real detail. But I would recommend you register for an ORCID ID. Whether you know it or not, you will have to do it. Enhance your LinkedIn profile, because not that I'm encouraging you to go get a new job, but collaborations come out of this. We're all at a time where we need to be networked more, in my opinion, and it is the one place to maintain your CV. Curate your Google Scholar citations, because they get noisy. Choose ResearchGate or academia.edu. They're both good. I personally are favoring ResearchGate over academia at this point. If you're doing reviews and choosing not to take advantage of your work through Publons, that's your choice, but I would encourage you to get credit. And Kudos, I think, is this unique tool right now for linking all of your work together that's connected to a paper. If you don't participate, that's okay. If you do, I am essentially guaranteeing you benefits if you're willing to put in the work. I think you should put in a minimum of 8 hours into your LinkedIn profile, at least. Which is no. Once. LinkedIn should be once for 8 hours. And you can spread it over the next 5 years if you want. But then 2 hours a month, because if you're publishing, you're presenting, make sure that your stuff is distributed. 2 hours a month is nothing if you compare how much noise we have in our lives. And then this is something I said in an interview with a Nature article, which got me the invite to go to Howard Hughes Medical Institute. So I'm kind of repeating it there. This is what I would do personally. I've done a lot of the work to filter out all the junk for you. There is still work to do. It can be overwhelming, and it's up to you whether you participate. Various versions of this talk, flavored in different ways for different audiences, are online if you choose to get them. If you have any questions, I encourage you to contact me. I'm fine with it. I will do my best to help. And hopefully this was of use, and that's what we're all after. So, thank you very much.
Yes, I'm just wondering, with the recommendation about putting your presentations online and the hint that Microsoft in some way touches them or owns them, where does the sort of copyright issue lie with all of that?
So you can actually copyright your slide decks, but as soon as you put them online, you have license control over them that way. I don't copyright anything because I work for the US government. Everything is put out as public domain from the presentation side. So you need to investigate your own control over those slide decks.
So my question, I guess, is tangential to that. Can you speak a little bit on, so you transitioned to EPA and how protecting versus sharing of the intellectual property that is?
Yeah, so for example, if I am releasing a slide deck, I go through a clearance process internally. So we have an internal process called using Stix, one of our platforms. So everything is reviewed. And then from there, when I've given the presentation, I have a choice to release or not release via another platform called Science Inventory, which makes it go public. As soon as it's public on Science Inventory, it's public domain, which means that as long as I don't make edits, as long as I don't change the wording from what's been cleared, I can take it and lift it and share it. Right? What I should not do and cannot do is I cannot take a scientific publication that is being cleared from our side and is in the public domain now, and then reword aspects of the scientific interpretation. I cannot make up my own views and profile about why I think this work is important. That is not appropriate. And I fully agree with the constraints we live under, because when a piece of work has been proved and cleared, if people choose to misinterpret it, I'm safe because we've gone through the entire process. But if I now make additional comments on that work and then my words are misinterpreted, I'm the one responsible for that. That's a very interesting challenge. I should think it's very similar to RTI that way.
Specific to LinkedIn, I'm curious to know your opinions about participation in groups and also the publication of articles on LinkedIn.
Participation in groups, I had a long list that I was involved with, and I've started to prune those back over the years. But there are some that I absolutely am very glad that I'm a part of, so I get information from those groups. I think it's a good thing to do. Just be very selective, because if you fill your profile with 50 groups, you're just inundated with information. The other one was about the article sharing on there.
Right. Do you use articles on LinkedIn, and have you seen any benefit of participating by publishing articles?
Actually, I have it on my list to write an article about the benefits of using this type of approach on LinkedIn. I want to get to it. I've just finished the publication. I'm writing a publication on social networking for scientists, so I want to get that out first. Then I'll summarize it. I think it's a very powerful platform to use for that purpose.
So I'm actually a bit confused about this issue of downloading articles from all of these places, because at least in the scientific domain that I work in, most of the articles that we write are behind paywalls.
Yep.
So I can't just put them out there for people to randomly download. So how does that work?
So I publish in places where it's paywall control. I also have open access articles. So ResearchGate in general, when they recognize that there is an article to be associated with you, where they will suggest that, or you will nominate an article for connection, they will ask you to make the approval of whether or not this is an open access article so it can be made available for download. And then they will, I don't know for sure, but I think they keep a copy of the open access article that are allowed to do. They probably store it locally, and then they keep the downloads from there, which I'm a little saddened by. I think they should keep the redirect from their platform to the publisher, so the download count is actually coming from the publishers. I think we're disconnecting things. When it's paywall protected, then you can still put the fact that you put the article title, put the abstract there, etc., and the link is made by a DOI. But
you would essentially be losing out on download credits for people who weren't able to access it.
Yes. Yeah, and there's actually, so the question was, how do I see bioarchive, and there's Chem Archive now, which is done by ACS. I'm not sure that they've been taking into account the fact that there is so much that's delivered from their platforms that should contribute to the altmetrics. I'm not sure that they've prepared for that world. I think they should absolutely do that. There's such high traffic that hits that site. There's so much history as they take different versions of the articles that go through, right? All of that needs to be encapsulated. So I think they should be working probably with somebody like ORCID, likely with somebody like Figshare, which I didn't even mention here. Figshare is a site for sharing data, and couple this with altmetrics directly. I know that these people would be willing to have those conversations. There is a little bit of distaste, I think, in some people's minds around this altmetrics approach. But I think the publishers need to jump on it. All I know is that more and more publishers have altmetric donuts. They all have ORCIDs. The mainstream publishing community has jumped on it. I'm not so sure that bioarchive has yet. I may be wrong.
So I know Google Scholars does patents. Do any of the other handle patents, or how do you see patents fitting into this conversation? On
LinkedIn, I have 2 patents. I have them on LinkedIn at the bottom. I have those posted on ResearchGate, and my patents do show up on Google Scholar. So I think you can actually share that information, and if they're US patents, then they're publicly available anyway via the USPTO site. So you would have a URL to those patents.
And then follow up, the USPTO has open access for their data too, and I can't think what the site is right now. It's like Open Patents or something of that nature, where you can search yourself and you can see where your publications are, you can see your links, you can see your most cited patent. I wish I had that link in my head, but I was wondering if you had heard of that or if you'd looked at that.
I've not. The only site I go to is the uspto.gov, which I've integrated to on the dashboard via the PubChem patents which is actually linked up to. So. One of the benefits for me of giving talks like this is I get educated because there's so many sites out there.
So one of the things that we've heard, we run a project that is a lot of scientific dissemination of technologies, is we have to be on Twitter like all the time. And so you didn't go into detail about your Twitter life, and so can you maybe go into detail if you use Twitter? If so, how you maybe link it to the more sciencey stuff and whatnot?
So first thing about, I'll comment on Facebook. I use Facebook. But I don't use it for science. I keep that locked to my community of friends, family. But I have friends who are scientists, so they see my stuff. So for everything I put up on SlideShare, etc., I always take the embed link, put it in Facebook, so all of my science friends see my slide decks. So that helps drive traffic. With Twitter, almost all of these sites have a single button that pushes things out to Twitter. So I take advantage of the Twitter network to drive traffic regularly. So I'm trying to find. If you go to my Twitter account on the Chem Connector, you will see I'm fairly active. The majority of what I do is every presentation, I push the Twitter button on SlideShare. On Kudos, I push a button on. From here, I push it out to Twitter, to LinkedIn, not to Facebook in general. I use Twitter a lot for scientific engagement. It's a very interesting world. It's faster for me to get a response from a person, a scientist I want to contact via Twitter than by email today. If I want a response, I hit them on Twitter because we're all picking up our phones and bing, bing, bing. I get phone calls within minutes. They'll take me 2 days to get an email response. That's messaging. I do very public exchange regarding our data sets as they're released to drive attention to it. I will do mini points for pointers to papers that I think are important that people read. I'm not as active as I used to be on Twitter, simply because of a work day in the EPA. I'm pulled in many directions, and I don't really want to do a lot of tweeting from inside the organization. It's not an EPA Twitter account. It's my personal Twitter account, so I need to apportion my time appropriately. Chem Connector. Chem Connector, ChemConnector. In fact, I know we're short on time, but if you want to check out the LinkedIn profile, I'm not saying to mirror it, but I'm saying as an example of what can be put on there. You can find me on there. This is Kudos. This is an example on Kudos, and I would encourage at least 1 or 2 people inside the organization to try Kudos and see the benefits. These are all the external resources, and it drives a lot of traffic to articles. This is Impact Story, ResearchGate. Oh, this is an example of where everything plugs together. So on my blog, which is chemconnector.com, this is my list of publications. So every publication I put out, I plug in the altmetric donuts, so this refreshes every time I load the page. This is where I think, Becky, you'd be interested in using these things. You probably are already. But there's the Kudos information plugged into the page. And every time I add something on Kudos or something changes in altmetric, this page refreshes and loads. So all of my publications have altmetrics on them. It's very useful to see all of this, your entire career represented this way, because you'll notice how things are very low for book chapters. I've written a lot of books. I'm not doing any more. It's just value's not there.
Got two questions, real quick. One, I can just say the word and see what the reaction will be. Sci-Hub. Is Sci-Hub causing things to disappear? I mean, there's naturally a lot of parasites. You alluded to that. This ecology is pretty complicated. And at some organizations, the only thing they ever touch is Sci-Hub. Is all of that traffic disappearing?
I think institutions need to be cautious about how publishers might come down very hard on the use of some of these tools online. I know there's a lot of, as an example, I'm not going to name the organization. I have to give a presentation of this nature on behalf of a publisher. And they said, please send your slide deck ahead of time. I want to see all the things you're going to talk about that are open and available that community can use. And I was told categorically that I had to remove the mention of certain tools because the publishers frown on them. They do not agree with them. They think they are ripping off their publications. I would not have mentioned Sci-Hub anyway. But the publishers are really, really concerned. They don't want to see their business go down. They don't want to put in all the work. And having worked for a publisher, it's a lot of work to take an article that comes in, to put it through the process, to assemble it, to release it. It is a lot of work. I've seen the business side of that. But they're all very concerned about their future. Publishing has changed. I have more views on blog posts than I have on articles. I got on the front cover of the Wikipedia Signpost newsletter, went all the way up to one level below Jimmy Wales because I wrote a disruptive blog post. Publishing, you can literally write up some science in an hour today. You've got electronic lab notebooks that release data out publicly. The publishers are concerned. They're worried. They're scrambling. I think we need to support them because I don't think publishing should go away. And some of these predatory systems, I think we need to be cautious ourselves. I'm not going to tell you whether I use Sci-Hub.
One other quick thing.
But I do use Google Scholar because that one's...
Where I've seen some resistance, people realize that they've stumbled into something that is a complex ecology. And the one thing is, I guess there was a bit of a scandal with LinkedIn. I don't know really what the other side of that is, that things were going on inside of LinkedIn, that it was misrepresenting that some colleague was asking you to do something, and it was more or less a robot. You know, it was an AI function inside of LinkedIn. And they got a pretty strong reaction from the scientific community. I don't know if that's really been entirely clarified, but I think it still hangs over LinkedIn, doesn't it? That you can get email and you're not sure, is it generated by Microsoft or was it generated by one of your colleagues?
Yeah, I don't know the details of that at all. I have an awareness of it, but I don't know much about it. But I think all of these systems, the developers of the systems, the hosts of the systems, they are trying to control traffic, drive traffic up, become number one. And having built commercial sites, etc., you will ride the edge of methods by which to drive attention and traffic that are appropriate. You will ride that edge as much as you possibly can until the rules change, or until you see the reverse, which is people leave your site. ResearchGate is an example of that. I think ResearchGate lost a following because they were hammering people every day. You're getting more and more emails. So they had to introduce controls to limit that.